Next, we're going to talk about something totally weird and exciting, which is the fact that in the oscillator section, if we switch to 2, there's a point where we have more functions that are not oscillators, even though they're in the oscillator section. So let us progress. Okay, so I just selected oscillator 2. And if we go through type, we're going to go through a lot that you recognize. Carpless strong, virtual analog, wave shaper, 2-op FM, etc. But eventually we're going to get to this thing that happens that is, okay, there's our FM, RM, and then pow, suddenly multi-filter. Now, when we get into these, it's a different situation because now, of course, we've chosen something that is not an oscillator, it is a filter. And this is sort of signified because this LED next to the 2 will turn a pale blue color instead of the whitish, vaguely bluish color. So it's a different, here, well, we can make it happen here. Okay, so there's FM, and then watch. All right, that's different. So the first function we have in this new setting is called multi-filter. And it basically takes oscillator 1 and oscillator 2, instead of being an oscillator, is now a very powerful filter. Another filter, which means then you have 2 filters. Only one bank of oscillators that you can play polyphonically, but you have 2 filters, which allows a wide variety of outcomes, even if this filter was the same as this filter, but it's not. And I'm going to show you how. Okay. So let's dive in, go over here to wave, which is our cutoff. Let's turn the shape all the way out. Wave becomes the cutoff for this new filter. And timbre becomes resonance. So that is a very interesting filter. I don't know if you can tell that, but that doesn't sound like a typical filter that I, as an analog guy, would be used to. That's a new filter, which I could dismiss easily as just being some digital thing. But our last knob, shape, explains what's going on here, because shape allows us to select different types of filters. Now, I'm used to filters like a 24 decibel per octave filter, or a 12 decibel per octave filter. These are common filter types found in analog synthesizers, which has to do with the curvature of the cutoff. So when you have a cutoff point, you can shape to what degree some harmonics still exist after the cutoff point. After the harmonics are being cut away by the filter slope defines how abruptly those harmonics are cut off. Usually there's kind of a little slope there. So there's a little bit of the harmonic content over the filter cutoff or under the filter cutoff, depending on what you're set to, that's left over as you move. And eventually it'll drop to 0. So in a 24 decibel per octave filter that we love, kind of the Moog sound, there's very little harmonic content after the filter cutoff point. But if we had like a 12 decibel per octave filter, like you'd find on a Korg MS-20, there's more, and it changes the sound of the filter. It makes the filter sound different. So that's why we get to shape, which is filter type. And what we've been listening to is a 36 decibel per octave filter. So I don't know about you, but as an analog guy, I don't ever see anything above 24 decibels per octave. So 36 means that filter slope is way steeper and there's very little harmonic content above the filter cutoff point. And that's why this filter sounds different and interesting and actually really cool. Now, I'm not sure why analog synths don't typically have 36 decibels per octave as a filter cutoff type. Maybe it just requires too much effort. But since we have a digital synthesizer here, we have more resources. That might be it. I'm not sure. So if we go down to the bass, like... You can get some really beefy basses with a filter of this type. So all of a sudden, and then don't forget, like I'm sitting here doing this, but we also still have the filter over here that we could be working with. So that's what's really cool about this. And it's not just a 36 decibel per octave low pass filter. There are other filter types like 24. Doesn't sound like they really have it going into filter like the self oscillation, but and what else do we have? We have a low pass 12 decibel per octave. And really cool, we have a 6 decibel per octave filter. Resonance goes away with 6 decibels per octave, and this is like a stereo tone knob. This is a very low end filter. But let's talk about something cool here that I have not mentioned yet. The volume knob, now that we're no longer talking about an oscillator, the volume knob becomes a wet-dry mix. So let's examine this 6 decibel per octave filter. What does this sound like? It's very mild, but sometimes that's what you want. In making a sound, you don't necessarily need the really steep slope of a 24 decibel or 36 decibel per octave filter. 6 is a very low slope. So after the cutoff point, there's a lot of harmonic content still there. So let's pause just for a second, because what I really wanted to do, and I realize this now, is I want to be up with the low pass 36, because this will really make the volume knob's wet dry mix evident. So we can go completely dry and then we don't hear the filter at all. And you might say, well, what good is that? Why would you have this setting? Because now you have one oscillator, you've lost another oscillator, and now you can't even hear the filter effect. It's because we can voltage control this knob. We could bring the filter in like with the wheel or something, or, you know, have an envelope that slowly brings in the filtered effect. And that filtered effect might be going crazy and we wouldn't hear it until we mixed it back in. So you have the ability to bring the filter effect in, and that's the cool thing about the volume knob now being a wet-dry mix. I'm going to turn it back to completely wet so we can continue to explore these filter types on the multi-filter, because we're not done. We've just gone through all of the low pass. There's also band pass and high pass and even notch. So let's keep going. Low pass 6. Now we jump to high pass 6, which is a great way to like cut a little low end out of a sound. So you're starting with this. Maybe you don't want it that bassy. Now, I'm not sure of this. I think this is true. The high pass filter on, say, a Juno 6, a Roland Juno 6, I think it is a 6 decibel per octave filter. And maybe the high pass found on the ARP Odyssey, I think that is also a 6 decibel. So it's not super intense. It's just letting you roll off a little of the low end of the sound. So it's very useful. But let's keep going. Next, we have a high pass 12, which brings our resonance back in. And we can have 24 decibel per octave high pass filter, which is something you never see on an analog synthesizer, but here it is. Let's turn the... So you can really carve all the bass right out of there. And of course we can bring the resonance up. And remember that in a high pass filter, if you have your resonance super high and your filter cutoff super low, it means there is a boost in your bass. Listen to how fat and bassy that chord is. So if you're making like digital sounds and you want something that's more meaty and more has a big foundation, this is where you go. You need something to fill in a big beefy sound. Choose whatever you want in your first oscillator, and then come over here in the second oscillator, select the multi-filter, and then boost the heck out of the bass, and then use your analog filter for whatever, you know. That is a surprisingly fat sound for a digital instrument. I'm very impressed. So yeah, you have these options now because of this multi-filter. Okay, but we're still not done, because we can go to high pass 36, which I've never even heard before now, according to my, you know. Wow. That is a crazy sound, and I love it. Next, we have a bandpass 12, which you might know is a combination of a high pass and low pass filter, leaving both the high part and the low part gone and the middle part present. High pass filters are typically 12 decibels per octave. Or bandpass filters are typically 12 decibels per octave. It's very nice sounding. Here is a bandpass 24 decibel per octave, which I think I've heard, but it certainly isn't very common. And here's something I'm sure I've never heard, is a bandpass 36 decibel per octave. It seems kind of quiet without the resonance. Really nice though. Weird. Next, we have a 12 decibel per octave notch. Notches, I find, work better without. The resonance tends to undermine the effect, so I'm not going to do a whole lot of resonance. But and if you had resonance up, it would sound like this. I mean, lesser resonance is better. All right. And a 24 decibel per octave notch. I'm not sure I've ever heard one of those. It's a great way to get a really cool non-pulse width modulation, non-filter sweep typical sort of sound. The higher decibel per octave filter, the cutoff slope, the better the notch sounds when you have resonance. Cool. And then a 36 decibel per octave notch, which is totally bizarre. I've never even heard this. Really cool. So granted, you are losing an oscillator, but my gosh, for a filter that sounds like that, it may be exactly what you want. I mean, that is a really cool sound. And again, while we're doing all these really cool filter things, remember that we can go over to our analog filter and be highlighting certain aspects, maybe, you know, boosting the low end and then letting this other filter do all the pretty stuff. You know, there's so much you can do with two filters, especially with two filters as powerful as these two filters are. And of course, all of that functionality is accessible as far as modulation is concerned from the patch panel, the matrix. So yeah, this was a great idea. Yep, you're sacrificing an oscillator, but you know, you can have some really great 6-note polyphonic sounds with one oscillator and a filter that sounds like that, or two filters. So it was an interesting and cool choice. This has been the Multifilter found in the oscillator section of the Arturia MiniFreak.